Lloyd Vance does a great job covering the NFL. Good follow on Twitter at Lloyd Vance. PFW writers as well. And, of course, NFL Network Contributor, kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on this Tuesday. What's going on, Lloyd?
No, not too much, Q. Yeah, it's starting to get a little quiet after a big Eagles win.
Yeah, you know what? They had their week. Now you start to talk about the offseason, right? The business aspect of it actually began moments after they won the Super Bowl. And we saw this, right? How many times when a team wins a Super Bowl, all of a sudden other coaches, they start to get poached from time to time. We saw it with DiFilippo, gone. We saw it with Frank Reich, who we talked a little bit about this, seems like a good fit in Indy. And I know there's talk maybe they'll elevate Deuce Staley as offensive coordinator, but right now they don't have an offensive coordinator. But how about DiFilippo leaving to go to Minnesota, and then, of course, Frank Reich now going to Indianapolis to work with Andrew Luck?
You're correct. And the Eagles are the hot commodity right now in the National Football League, so everybody is going to try to poach from their tree. DiFilippo, a guy who really was credited with a lot of the ascension of Nick Foles. They think he's the guy to step in there with the Vikings and kind of sort out that situation. Now we're going to see who they're going to keep at quarterback. I still believe that's going to be Case Keenum, and they'll probably get rid of the other two guys. But that's a great opportunity for him to come in there, be a play caller. Mike Zimmer is not going to get really involved on the offensive side of football and just let him run that side of the ship. Frank Reich, we know he kind of was the second choice after Josh McDaniels, but I think in the end he may be the better choice because he's more ready to step into that job, a veteran coach that's been around the league, well-respected. And Andrew Luck, I am expecting him to come back from that shoulder injury this year, and he's going to be able to work with him and try to get him to the next level.
Two things. Go back to the Vikings for a second. Do you believe at all they'll offer Teddy Bridgewater a short-term contract?
What they're going to do with Teddy is I think they're going to, I hate to say lowball him, but I think they're going to give him a veteran minimum type deal. And if he wants to take that and come back and mostly as the backup, maybe get a chance to compete in camp. But I think in the end it's going to be Case Keenum there. And maybe he says, you know what, I'm going to take my opportunity to look around the NFL and see if there's another chance. We just saw that with Foles. He rejuvenated his career, and we've seen that with other guys that were backups and got a chance in another place. So came back from a devastating injury, and hopefully he'll get his chance.
And the only reason I bring it up is because with DiFilippo now as the Vikings' new offensive coordinator, he's pretty much going to have a ton of input on which quarterback they choose to go with. So you think Bradford's going to be the odd man out. Do you think Bradford retires?
Well, you know, Sam Bradford's guys made a lot of money over the years, and I know he wants the opportunity to keep playing, but his body just cannot keep healthy. Maybe a team will give him a chance to come in and try to be a starter in training camp, but I think he does try to look for one more spot to land in. But it's going to be a fight for him to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, and you know it's going to be up to him. He's made a lot of money, and we'll see where he goes from there.
What are the chances that the Eagles promote Deuce Staley to offensive coordinator?
Well, I talked to some guys around the team, and it's pretty much between Deuce and Groh, who's the receivers coach, and I think he's going to move over to the quarterbacks coach. So it's in name only, let's face it, because we saw this with the Chiefs earlier. Andy Reid gave Eric Bieniemy, who was a running backs coach, the offensive coordinator title, but Andy was still calling the plays, and I still think that Doug Peterson will be the primary play caller for the Eagles. So Deuce could come in there as a understudy at offensive coordinator and kind of learn really how to call the plays and work with the whole offense, the offensive line, the receivers, and how everything fits together. So maybe he does get that in name only, but I don't see them bringing anybody from the outside at this point.
Yeah, because the Eagles were expected to promote assistant quarterback coach Press Taylor to quarterback coach. So, and I know Deuce got criticized a lot for the way he was using running backs when he was with Chip Kelly, and he was basically, I remember he went on the record, someone asked him, and he goes, listen, I put the guys out there, I divide up the carries. Well, obviously it worked well this year because he was able to take 3 or 4 different backs and make it work.
Yeah, and he's done a great job. He's learned it in the system, and the Eagles have always coached him up, and he worked with Coach Ted Washington, who was there for a number of years as the Eagles running backs coach, and he was Deuce's coach. So he's learned from the best. But a lot of times running backs coaches, I don't know what it is, they just seem to stay with their unit. We saw Edgar Bennett get the job with the Green Bay Packers, move up from running backs coach to OC, and just didn't kind of work out there. So hopefully Deuce, if he's ready for the job, is able to step in and do a good job.
All right, the Giants, I thought they should have made a push for Deuce. They went in another direction when Mike Shula worked well with Cam Newton. You saw some of the numbers he put up that MVP year. MVP, career numbers, 30-something odd points a game. What's your takeaway with the Giants hiring Shula?
Yeah, he was looking for an opportunity, and let's face it, he lost that job with the Panthers kind of late, and we see a lot of guys around the Senior Bowl time trying to look for a job, and he was out there in the open, and it was interesting that Pat Shurmur went with that choice. I thought he may go with somebody else there. But Mike Shula, guys, you're saying, ran that offense pretty well for the Panthers, particularly the year that they made a Super Bowl and Cam was MVP. So he's going to go in, and he's got a totally different type of quarterback this time. He's going to have to develop some things from the pocket for Eli Manning. Obviously, he's not going to have those run-pass options that Cam was doing so well. So I think Shurmur, who's also a former offensive coordinator, is going to have a lot of input there. So I think Shula has kind of been brought in to work underneath Pat Shurmur. I think he's also going to coach quarterbacks too. Which is kind of interesting because if you go back to my original point where I always felt Eli was going to come back, now you're talking the fourth or fifth offensive coordinator he's had since 2004. You're not sticking a rookie out there. You at least need a veteran that can adjust on the fly. So, again, that's one of the other reasons I thought, if anything, he would at least get one more year under center. Yeah, he's coming back, obviously. The ownership group did not want this to end the way it was trending at the end of the season. And they were totally out on McAdoo, and they've always been pretty firm in Eli's on his side. So I think Shurmur's coming in. He talked to Eli first and foremost, assured him that he was our quarterback. And I think he's going to play probably 2 to 3 more years at his age and try to give it a chance to rebuild this thing. And we know in the NFL, we've seen it with the Eagles as well as the Jaguars. You can go from worst to first very quickly. Correct. Again, a couple minutes with Lloyd Vance joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on this Tuesday. I know there's the details they have emerging. I think they're still a little sketchy regarding 49ers linebacker Reuben Foster, a talented player, but just obviously seems to get in problems off the field, arrested for domestic violence. Allegedly dragged his girlfriend during an argument Sunday morning. So I'm wondering if you look at how the NFL has handled domestic violence and players getting arrested, now you've got a situation where he's faced potential counts of domestic violence, criminal threats, possession of an assault weapon. The list goes on and on. Some of these charges could be a misdemeanor and or a felony. But again, he's got to face a ton of scrutiny from NFL officers, especially after what transpired with Ezekiel Elliott. No doubt about that. And we could be looking at another Aldon Smith situation or a Greg Hardy situation here with Reuben Foster. It's been habitual problems with him over and over again. I know John Lynch thought he got a steal, getting him at the 31st pick last year at the end of the first round. But there were a lot of red flags, including some events that went on at the Combine that caused him to fall so far in the draft. Yes, a very talented kid. He was hurt a little bit this year, played in 10 games or so, and he made a lot of plays when he was out there. But off the field, he just can't keep himself out of trouble. Obviously, Lynch is going to try to protect him and do the things to keep him around moving into this season. But if this continues in this trend where the NFL is going to get involved, obviously, I think he's going to be suspended after they do their investigation, possibly the 6 games that we saw with Ezekiel Elliott. But eventually they're going to step away from it. He's too big of a problem. Yeah, and remember, Elliott was suspended for 6 games for domestic violence, even though he was never arrested or charged. So this tells you with this incident, the details that are stemming from this incident, this could be a long suspension. And I know people don't like when you rush to judgment right away, but if this is the case, and the 49ers started to play winning football last year, they give Garoppolo all that money, they have a change of culture, do you probably think they're having this conversation, you know what, this guy's talented, but he's not worth our trouble? And it's almost as though we're just going to cut him. And that's the new NFL that we're dealing with. We saw that with Greg Hardy with the Dallas Cowboys. Too much trouble in the locker room. He still brought some heat in terms of sacks, but eventually they moved on from him, and the team still kept moving forward. And they said, you know what, when this guy's not around, we still are playing at a high level. So, you know, Reuben Foster, he better start getting it, or he'll be out of the NFL. We see Johnny Manziel right now trying to campaign his way back in the NFL, and we know the league will turn its back on you very quickly. It's interesting you brought up Johnny Manziel. I wanted to close with that.
listen, I know when someone comes out and they've dealt with the problems that he has dealt with, and when you start to say, okay, I'm diagnosed as bipolar, that's really nothing to joke with. You can't sit there and say a person's making up. I mean, if that's the diagnosis, then so be it. We saw Brandon Marshall go through with this and still be able to resume his career in the NFL. And I heard, I think it was Hawkins, one of Manziel's former teammates, the wide receiver with Cleveland last night. I was a little surprised. I don't know if you heard his comments. They asked him, outside the lines asked him that, do you think Manziel will have an opportunity back in the league? And he goes, well, listen, if you're talking about the quarterback position and you're talking about talent for talent, he said, quote, I'm taking the guy that's not dealing with the bipolar stuff. Now, I thought it was pretty strong words, but I'm just wondering, because now Manziel comes out and says what he says, do you think there'll be a little sympathy involved here with this, with him coming out like this, and maybe some teams will give him the benefit of the doubt? Or is this just, listen, he's just not talented regardless of what he's dealing with off the field to actually warrant signing him and offering him a contract?
Yeah, Q, I was surprised how forthright he was in that Good Morning America interview and the other stops that he made yesterday. And, unfortunately around the NFL, there is this stigma attached to mental health issues, and some personnel evaluators just can't get around it. And then the quarterback is supposed to be the leader of the team, a guy who's, that steely demeanor can overcome anything. And a lot of general manager types, they don't want to hear the quarterback saying that they're vulnerable. So given also substance abuse and off-the-field issues in terms of being arrested, this is not going to help his resume. So I think in the end, Johnny Manziel, I think the league wants to see him go play somewhere else. I know he was offered a contract in Canada and didn't take it, but maybe he needs to go somewhere else, prove himself, and maybe he'll get an opportunity in the NFL. I've always heard John Gruden's been enamored with him, but obviously being a new coach of the Raiders, he does not want to reach out and bring a problem into his locker room right away.
No, because the Raiders never do that. They've never done that in their franchise, right? All right, listen, good stuff as always, pal. Enjoy the rest of your week. We will talk next week. Always appreciate a couple moments and great insight.
All right, thanks for having me on.
All right, you got it. Lloyd Vance joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.